everyone, it's Mary. In this video I will talk about the books that I read from roughly August until the end of November. Then I hopefully will upload a December wrap-up. I think I will catch up with this video of all the books that I read during the summer. I'll talk first about the books, the non-fiction books that I read, and then I'll go into the fiction. I did not read a lot. Well, this year has not been a great reading year, and that's why I will not post a best of 2019 best books I read, because I gave only 2 books 5 stars. One of them was a reread. Both of them are in this wrap-up, by the way. They were good, you know, they were interesting. I'm glad that I read them, but it was just not the ideal, you know, reading experience throughout an entire year that I was hoping to have. So hopefully next year is gonna be better. And also about the non-fiction that I have been reading, I was thinking that maybe I should just talk about them separately, the ones that are about education and parenting, just because I've been reading so many of them that, you know, I have enough content to make a specific video about them, and so that people that are interested in them can get a more like in-depth insight of these books, and people that are not interested in them, they don't have to listen to me babbling, you know, about these books endlessly. That's what I've been doing basically for the entire year. And I hope that I'll not do the same thing now. I'll try and just be very concise about them. But yeah, I have been reading a lot concerning the Montessori method, again, education-wise and parenting-wise. I had heard of it, but I had never knew what it was really about. Maria Montessori was such a badass. She was active in the 20s in Italy, and she was one of the first women doctors, one of the first 3 actually in Italy again. She was a doctor and she specialized on psychology, and she was very passionate about education. So afterwards she went to schools and actually, you know, founded this Montessori method that is more like school related than, you know, at home, but actually is useful both in school and at home, of course. It's just a different approach where the child is the protagonist, which, I don't know, I feel like reading her works was really eye-opening to me, how groundbreaking it is, especially now we're in 2020 and it's still so new and fresh and unheard of, most of the things that she says, and it just baffles my mind. She would be ahead of time even now, which is again a bit baffling and a bit sad as well, because you think, well, now that a lot of people, a lot of experts have been researching on child psychology and stuff, we should be more aware of what children need and how to approach them in the right way. It's just so important to understand that children are human beings, and they're not unfinished men or women. They are a finished person, you know, they are finished people, even now that they are, you know, children. And especially because for them the time is so disproportionate. 2 years for them, it's so long, because so much happens, so much changes, that for us it passes in a minute, and for them it's their lifetime. And it's such an important period of time as well, because they don't have a memory, but the body does and the mind does, and things get ingrained in their beings. And so, you know, you don't want to mess with that, and you want to be able to help them find their own independence. That's basically the whole, you know, method in a nutshell. Just guide the child and help them do things themselves, and to create a space and a world that is for them. Otherwise, of course, it's gonna be, you know, cries and just frustration, because they're living in a world that is not made for them. They can't reach things, they can't do things themselves, they can't try and make mistakes because we expect them to be, quiet and just perfect all the time, which they can't be, because they have to try and to make mistakes and to get everything messy and dirty and stuff. So that's basically it. It's sad to know that even now children are people with less rights than anybody else, basically, because they cannot speak for themselves, and parents act like they own them, like they're things and not human beings, which is very sad again. And especially because children are so dependent, affection-wise, on their parents. They just love them unconditionally. So if you take advantage of this love and affection, you're basically a monster. Okay, maybe this is pushing it too far. I don't want to scare anyone. This is just, the Montessori method and my thoughts. A bit mingled, but yeah, the Montessori method focuses on the child and their innate want and willingness to learn, because if we encourage this wanting to learn that they have, then it's going to be easier for them growing up, because children are desperate to learn things, to do what we are doing. So if we do everything for them and then all of a sudden expect that they do things themselves, it just doesn't work. So encouraging their independence is very hard, because it means that it takes up a lot of time and a lot of mess again, because if a child wants to wash his hands, of course it will take like an hour or something, because maybe he wants to play with water and he's gonna wet himself and all those things. What you want to do is just leave less toys, maybe like 2 or 3 activities that are very definite and very separate, and then let the child choose which activity they want to do. And this way you don't have a lot of mess, because you have few materials to be working with. And yeah, so that's basically it. I've read concerning this method, I've read 2 books by Maria Montessori herself. This one I found translated with kind of on Goodreads. It corresponds to this book here, which I don't think it's the same one, just because this book that I found on Goodreads seems to be more general, while this one is a collection of texts and speeches that are concerning school and education only. That's the first one that I read, and I was like, I don't think this one's for me. I mean, I can see her method, I love it, she's great, but it's just, I don't think I'm the target audience of this book, because it just talks about school and how, if you are a teacher, basically how to approach the Montessori method. And then I read this one, which, again, I'm gonna pop a picture here of the original, not the original, this is the original, of the English version. And this one was amazing, was so brilliant, and I recommend this to anybody, even if you're not, a parent. It's just brilliant, and she's amazing. She's a badass. So yeah, and then again, concerning the Montessori method, I've read the Montessori Toddler by Simone Davies, and she is American, and she's teacher. Yeah, she's a teacher. She's a Montessori teacher. So I really think that this book is very valid, because with the Montessori method, you need to be careful, because a lot of people claim that, that what they're doing is Montessori, while it's really not. Since it's not a very definite method with rules, a lot of people just reinterpreted it, and yeah, so I don't think it's wrong, but it's just not. If you want to be a purist, if you want to know what it really is, then you have to look for people that are really invested in the method, and they have been researching on it. So this book is great, again, because since Maria Montessori was active in the 20s, 20s, 30s, and I think 40s as well, then it's kind of hard to relate sometimes, and since it's a very practical method, maybe what you want is to have, a practical kind of sort of guide on how to do this in your everyday life. which materials you have to get, how to rearrange the spaces in your house. So this one was great for all of these reasons, and also very beautifully published and very pretty, which, you know, it's always a plus. This one I will not talk about too much because, again, it's an Italian book, it's not translated, and it's just same old on my channel. I think I'm like a broken record, but this one is on, it talks about prejudices on breastfeeding and co-sleeping, and it's just very empowering for women that just gave birth. So I handed this book to a couple of friends, and they actually really were happy about it, and I'm so happy that I could help them, because what you need when you just gave birth is just someone that tells you you're enough, you're good, you're doing the right thing. This one was very good again, but not translated, unfortunately. Then we have a French book, which is by Isabelle Filliozat. I don't know how to pronounce her name. I'm gonna put an English version of it, and it's Understanding Children's Emotions. And again, this one was very powerful and very useful again. And it basically, I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but it's just it just focuses on the child. It basically helps you shift your perspective and, you know, to see things through your child's eyes, and this way you can help them you know, getting in tune with their emotions. Firstly, by getting in tune with your own emotions, and not be, you know, in a competition, your emotions towards your child's, because that's not gonna work. If you don't recognize your own emotions, and then you tend to project them on the child, and that's a very heavy burden for them to be taken on. If you let your children know that you can feel sadness, that you can feel you know, all sorts of feelings, and then you can get out of them, they're all legitimate and they're all right to be feeling, then they will not be afraid to show their emotions. Children live in the present, and they don't think about the past, they don't know about the past, and they cannot yet project themselves into the future. So living in the present constantly means that everything is very overwhelming, and emotions are very intense for them. That's why they have those reactions that seem so disproportionate to our adult eyes. And this book just helps you, you know, get into their shoes and try and understand and verbalize. I don't know if that's a word for them, what they're feeling. You know, try to put into words what they can't. Basically, I just felt like this book was very well written, and it was a very quick read, and just, you know, very useful. On to the fiction books that I read. The first one I'm gonna mention is it's a reread, and it is The Great Gatsby by F.Scott Fitzgerald, and I adore this book. I first read this book 3 years ago, and it was August, and at that time, I mean, it was a perfect time to be reading it, because I was on holiday, I was on the beach, it was so relaxed, and I was in the mood for something like that. So it was just the right book at the right time. But I remember liking it, but not extremely, you know, not loving it to bits. So I think at that time I gave it 4 stars. And then the year after, so last year, I felt the urge to reread this book. I don't know why. It was August, and I was like, I really feel like rereading The Great Gatsby, which is something weird, because I used to be a rereader when I was, you know, a teenager. And then, you know, stuff happened, and a lot of books were piling up. And, you know, when you have so many books to read, of course, you feel like you're taking away time when you're rereading a book. And I just didn't feel compelled to pick up again books that I read, even though I really enjoyed them. But with this one, it was different. I don't know. I reread it, and I loved it the second time, and I gave it 5 stars. And this year, again, it was August, and I was like, this is gonna be some sort of tradition, and I'm liking it. Every August, I'm gonna reread The Great Gatsby, apparently. So yeah, this time around again, I loved it. I just feel like, you know, I could never say no to The Great Gatsby. Like if right now somebody would ask me, would you buddy read this book with me? Or would you want to reread this book again? And I'm like, even if it's December, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. It's just so quick. It's so beautiful, but again, it reads so quickly. And yeah, apart from the writing style, which is amazing, as everybody, you know, seems to be thinking, I just think that the story, which is not particularly, you know, complex and full of nuances, it's just a story that gets into your skin, that gets under your skin in a very positive way. It just stays with you, and even though nothing, you know, spectacular happens, it really grabs your attention, and you're like turning the pages and wanting to know how it ends and how it, you know, how it goes, even though I know how it, you know, how it ends because I've read it 3 times now. It just it's magical. Every time that I reread this, I'm happier and happier to have read this story. So yeah, I don't know, I highly recommend this book. It's just, I think it's great. And I read the beloved The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna, and I think it was an enjoyable read. I give it 3 stars. But what it is, I was a bit let down by this book because I had very high expectations, especially because everybody that I know really loved this book. At least the majority of, you know, of people. And not only that, but also the fact that I expected something different from the blurb, from the you know, from the reviews that I heard, that I read. I just thought it was gonna be something different. It is set in England during a summer in the 70s where there was a heat wave, and Mrs. Creasy goes missing, and the neighborhood basically goes bonkers about this disappearance. And you know, there are intrigues, and these 2 young girls that are 10 or 11-year-olds, they decide they want to know what happened and basically start to look into this disappearance. And yeah, I was thinking more of a detective sort of, you know, detective sort of story in which those 2 young girls would play detective again and find out what happened. But it's not really that. It's not like an active play detective sort of story. They're more like stumbling on clues and on bits of information, and it's just I don't know. I don't have a problem with a very precocious child, you know, that's very clever, even maybe ahead of her age, but their thoughts didn't really match their actions. They would act very, you know, naively and just very childishly, and then think very mature thoughts, which I thought didn't really combine. It was just something was off in their, you know, characterization. And I think that's the author's fault, because you can be, you know, you can be mature and childish at the same time, especially when you're coming of age. But in this story, I just felt like they were, I don't know, sometimes I would feel like if you think this, then you cannot do what you just did. Maybe, again, I was expecting this because when I was very young, their age, even younger, I was obsessed with being a detective and with being a spy, and it was just my favorite game. I would try and spy conversations and stuff, and I thought it was gonna be something like that, but you know, it's really not. So I think it was more of my fault. That I was, you know, that I was projecting my own experience into this book, and I was like, I would not have done that, or maybe a bit of a letdown because I thought it was gonna be, you know, this sort of quest, maybe clumsy, of course, because they're children, but it was not. And it did suffer from the, you know, debut novel sort of syndrome, in which the author wants to pack so many things in so little space. Even language-wise, so many figures of speech that were repetitive after a while. I don't know, and the ending was very rushed, and it was so unsatisfying, talking about an anticlimax. Oh boy. But yeah, it just left me meh at the end, which was a pity. But yeah, I mean, it was a good reading experience. That's why it's not a bad book, and I gave it 3 stars. And again, I see why people would enjoy this sort of book, but I don't think, it worked that well for me. And again, I was let down. So yeah. The last book that I'm going to talk about is Dandelion Wine by Bradbury. And I'm so sorry that I read this book in this particular time period, because this book is so beautiful and the writing is just so beautiful and so lyrical, so packed with nostalgia and magic and all sorts of feelings, from happiness to sadness to bitterness. It's a ride, and it was not the right time for me to pick up this book because I did not have time to read. I was very tired, and what happened was that I would pick up this book, read 3 pages, and then put it back for like 3 days. And when I picked it back up, I did not even remember what was happening, of course, because if you read 3 pages of a novel that is so dense and full of things, you're just missing out. And it was just such a pity for me to have read this book in this particular way, and it took me so long, and it's not a long book. And yeah, I'm so sorry, because I feel like I want to reread this book. I give it 4 stars, so I really enjoyed it, but I feel like it would have been even better if I had, more time to get absorbed in it and just, put myself into those situations in a very active way. And I felt like I read this very passively because I was not able to get into the story for those short periods of time in which I was actually reading it. And this is set again during the summer of this time it's 28, so, and it's in America. I think this book is perfect to read at the beginning of the summer, just to set the mood, but also, as I did, at the end of the summer, because it adds this sort of nostalgia to it, which is already actually present in the book, but in your reading experience, it just, I think it enhances it. I think it's great to read all summer long, from the beginning until the end, and it's just a recollection of memories of the author mixed with fantastical elements, and this is magical realism done right. And I'm not really a fan of magical realism, just because most times it's not done in the right way, and it just feels I don't know, it doesn't give me the right sort of feelings, the right vibes. It's just I feel quite distanced from it, and this was just the perfect amount of magical realism. It could be described also as a sort of a short story collection, because even though this is a novel, it is composed of these short stories that are loosely connected. And I'm not a fan of the short story format, but this really works well, possibly because it's not a short story collection, but it's a novel. But anyway, it had that same kind of sort of vibe that short story collections give me that I don't like, but in this case I really much enjoyed it, and each story was powerful in a different way, and all of them were ingrained in my brain in a very deep way. And I still think about, I finished this book at the end of September, and I'm still thinking about a lot of things, a lot of stories in this one. So definitely recommend this one, and I really want to reread this at some point, because yeah, my reading experience didn't give this book justice. So yeah, this one. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you read any of the books that I mentioned. I will talk to you guys very soon with my, I'll be back with my December wrap up and possibly a haul. But yeah, not making too many promises here. I hope you had a great start to the new year, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!